Okay, so, oh, man, I will fuck. Okay, so today I did get the mounts. These are going to be 1320 mounts. I did already open them up just to make sure I got the right ones when I got it. But again, we didn't go with Passport because this isn't really that kind of car. It's more of a budget build, and these are actually pretty good mounts from what I can tell. We're not going to be putting down a whole lot of horsepower, so we don't have to have mounts that are going to just be super crazy. These are 75A mounts. I actually ordered 65A mounts, but they were out of them. So they do have their logo on there. It says 1320. You know, they seem fine. They're not like, they're welded together, they're not one piece of billet aluminum. But for our power output, they'll be just fine. It looks like you have a transmission side, the side that goes on the car itself, and the driver's side. These should get it in the car. Next thing we do is actually just drop it in. Oh my God, there's a frog right there. Jesus Christ. Look at that frog. He's just chilling, dude. Oh. He just peed all over me. Here's something that I don't tell you about that chassis. So, if we look here, these two bolts are easy to get to, but there's one in the very back that's right up against the firewall. What the f is that, dude? Come on, Honda. How's your regular Joe supposed to get to that bolt? Well, it's not that one. We're gonna try this guy out. Also a no-go. I'll report back. Alright, so I can't find a tool that I can get to the back of this, and I really don't want to drop the subframe, even though I know it's probably just a couple bolts. I just don't want to do that. So, I'm just gonna notch this with a grinder, so it gives me access to that bolt that's underneath there. And then, I mean, I think that should do it. Alright, so I think I got a solution to the issue. I just notched that guy out, and it seems like now, yeah, look at that. Should fit just fine now. Cool. So I got it. You know what's sad? In a bind, I would totally still use it. The 1320 mounts look like the bolts that were on it previously, they're too short for the back. I'm sure these are problems that you probably wouldn't have if you bought Passport, but I didn't buy Passport, so this is where we're at. New mount in, bolted right up. I'm assuming it's in the right spot. We'll find out. So I think we're about ready to drop this thing in after we move a few things out of the way. And turn this engine around. I'm slightly worried about these AC lines. I might go ahead and just take these out because I don't really want to ruin them, because I plan on putting AC in this car. And I think just to be safe. I also think I'm going to grind this mount off here so it's not in the way. I have a buddy that has a DA, which has the same cross member thing, and he said that mount can get in the way of the cable to hydraulic conversion, and I do plan on doing that. Go ahead and remove that, just grind that off flat so it's not in the way. Mount grinded off here. Now we're gonna hit it with some all-in-one fusion. Fusion. I realize that you're probably asking yourself, Matt,
why would you just drill the spot welds out?
Well, that's because I didn't want to, and the grinder did some work, so that's why. The engine in the car. I don't know if you can see or not. It's getting pretty dark. All the mounts lined up pretty good. 1320 wasn't too bad. The rear mount gets pretty close to the subframe down there, but I think we'll be okay. I mean, I can't imagine the engine moving a whole lot. But anyway, it's in the car. Now what I gotta do is put this hood on and take my ass inside because it's Halloween and I ain't got no candy. And if I'm not inside with the porch light off, all them little kids are gonna be hitting me up. And I'm gonna have to break some hearts. All right, so as you can see, we definitely got the engine in the other night, right before the kids came for trick-or-treating. Man, it was close. Fortunately, nobody had come by yet. That's a good start. So now we just got some little things to do, basically hooking up some wiring. We went out to the yard and got a few things that we were missing, like extra fan. This is the radiator that came out of the Integra. I'm not sure if this is gonna work, but we're gonna give it a shot. I already bought another radiator. I don't know, man. So I bought a radiator. If this one works, I'll go ahead and cancel that one. The swap is kind of messed up because you gotta use like special linkage for the EF stuff. You can't just use any B series linkage, apparently. I didn't know that. But anyways, this is what we're working with currently. I painted the exhaust manifold last night and put it on there. Rather than all of that wiring, I went ahead and just bought some harnesses because Mark from Honda Street Garage was like, don't even mess with that stuff. The wires are probably jacked anyways. And sent me some links, went ahead and bought it. Trying to fit the Integra radiator, it's a no-go. But it's really, really close. It's the pegs on the bottom. They don't line up perfectly. And it might possibly be a little bit wider. So it does seem like it's a little higher on the left. I think it's supposed to slide more down into it like this on the right. But like I said, the pegs on the bottom don't really line up. So it's probably not a bad thing that I bought a new one. This one's really not gonna be it. I got a couple harnesses here. I got this harness, which I'll put on the screen as far as what that is. And that one's not gonna work. This harness, which is basically a tucked harness from eBay that is set up for OBD1. And that should work just fine. So the online wording for the harness that I got here is very deceptive. It doesn't actually work with an EF harness. It doesn't seem like anyways. The one I got, which is this one, actually does work with it, and it's set up for the DX cars. It connects into the existing harness that's in the car and powers it perfectly. What I'm going to do today is I'm just going to fish this through, make sure it plugs up to every plug on my engine. It should already be dual point to multi-port injection swapped. Should make everything a lot easier than what I was going to do with the other wiring. That done. Oh, I also got the injectors that I'm using. Those are OBD2 injectors. I'm using an OBD1 harness, so I had to get jumpers to go from the OBD1 harness to the OBD2 injectors. We'll get those put on, get the harness put on, and then when the sub harness comes in, I should be able to just plug that in. Hopefully. The harness in, you probably can barely see it. It's actually really nice. Like everything was nice lengths for everything. I do have a bunch of jumpers here that I'm gonna do something with at some point. And alternator hooked up. I'm using an OBD0 alternator. I'm using an OBD0 starter. And I'm using a OBD1 distributor. Everything hooked up fine. I know I'm gonna have to run a wire from the fuse box to the alternator. And I'm going to end up moving the power wire for the battery to the back because there's just not a lot of room up here. I did have to change the thermostat housing to one that has a fan switch on it because the fan switches on the OBD0 engines are in the back and it's not set up for that. Plus it's the older type of plug. We gotta put some fluids in it. Then we should be just about ready to fire it up. So we just finished up a valve adjustment. If you wanna know how to do a valve adjustment, man, just go on YouTube and type in b18 valve adjustment. There's like a million videos. I know Eric the Car Guy has a really good one. I'll link that somewhere around here if you want to know how to do a valve adjustment on a b18. So I can put the valve cover back on, hopefully for the last time, and I'm going to go ahead and make sure I use sealant on the corners of these camshaft areas for the valve cover so that the valve cover doesn't leak. Valve covers on these engines leak easily, so you want to make sure that you seal the corners so you don't have that problem. But other than that, I'm on to the next thing. Valve adjustment done. Now what we're going to do today is find out if you can use a shorter alternator belt to not have to dent in the side of your car in order to adjust the belt. So I tried what they say is a factory belt, which is this Bando belt that you get from Amazon right here. As far as I can tell, there's some conflicting information online, but it is too long. What happens is once you adjust the alternator back to this length, it gets into the side of the car, which obviously won't work. So what I've done is bought a shorter belt as well as an even shorter belt. Hopefully we can get one of these belts on and we don't have to push the alternator so far back, and we can avoid having to dent the side of the car in. So the belt I'm going to use first is the Continental belt, and it's just slightly shorter than the factory belt. I'll tell you after I figure out which one will work, if any of them will work, I'll tell you which one it was so that maybe you can buy it and avoid the hassle of having to use a hammer on your car. I'm not opposed to that, to be honest. I just forgot to do that before I dropped the engine in, and I'm trying to avoid having to do that now. So upon further inspection, basically the APK 780 belt is 30.7 inches around, and it fits pretty good. You can also use a slightly bigger belt, but honestly, you probably want to go like a slightly smaller belt, maybe like a 30-inch belt or even a 27-inch belt would bring the alternator even further away from the side of the car. it does work. You don't have to hit the side of your car in if you don't want to. It's close though. I mean, it's super close. And I don't know, we'll see what happens whenever there's some engine torque. Obviously this engine is not like a super high horsepower car, so there shouldn't be a whole lot of engine torque. So now that we have the alternator situation figured out, what we're gonna do is go ahead and work on the radiator. I've tried the Integra radiator, it's too tall and it doesn't match up. I've tried Civic radiators, they're half radiators, they don't fit, like the newer Civics, they don't fit. So what I've done is I bought this unit here, which is from DNA Motorsports, and it is radiator for this car, but obviously it's more of a budget choice, more of a factory replacement. It doesn't have aluminum end tanks. It doesn't have any crazy width to it. It's just a factory replacement. I want to go ahead and stick this in there and see if it fits. Also, I need to get a radiator fan on it that I picked up from the salvage yard. And this particular radiator fan right here is a OBD0 radiator fan. It's got the OBD0 plug on it. I'm hoping that it will mount into the Civic radiator. It might be wishful thinking. Either way, I have a aftermarket radiator fan that I can wire in if I need to. But I'd really like to use the factory fan, save this for something that needs more airflow. Looking here, the radiator fan out of the Integra will work. The top bolts do line up pretty well up there, but the bottom is where we're gonna have to make some adjustments. So there was a rubber guy that was on here that I pulled off, which made this area here extremely wide. So now that will actually slide down in there like so, and you can see that these are lined up still up here. So but this guy here needs to be cut down a little bit, or maybe even cut off completely. But after we do that, it should theoretically slide down in there with no problems. After lobbing off this one leg, it sits in there pretty well now. These holes line up good enough anyways that I can get it mounted, and this should plug up just fine to the OBD0 harness. So I'm gonna get this mounted in the car, make sure it sits right. The radiator in, I came across a small issue. That peg right there is hitting on the front subframe. So I'm gonna have to make an adjustment. Now I know when I'm making a choice between whether I'm going to cut the radiator or the subframe, I'd rather not cut my radiator because I use that peg to mount the fan, and I know I'm not probably gonna be keeping the subframe the entirety of this car. I'll probably end up getting some sort of traction bars, because basically that gets rid of that fat area and gets me a lot more room in the front of the car. So I'm gonna go ahead and just notch the subframe itself. That way the radiator would slide right down into the hole. Damn it, gotta cut some more. Handle here, just gotta paint it up. Notch that little area there. And I had to grind off quite a bit there so that peg would go down in, but we should be all set now. I'll paint it up, we'll get it in there. Okay, so now that we got the radiator in and we got the fan situation figured out, we can go ahead and hook up the coolant lines. My verdict on the DNA radiator, I'm gonna give them a pass because basically I'm pretty sure they want you to use a traction bar. Most people use a traction bar. I haven't purchased a traction bar yet. All in all, I think it's gonna work out fine. For our next hurdle, radiator hoses. This one, the lower one, seems to be fine. It's just a little bit too long. We can shave it off down there, it'll be okay. The top one though, I'm gonna have to do a little bit of modifications to, because it's fine up there, but it's a hard bend here to get on there. And that's too much. I got a solution. The bottom one, like I said, I just cut a little bit and it's fitting just fine. It's staying away from the shifter fork, which is ideal. I don't want it rubbing a hole in that. The top one, I actually had my GSR swap sitting over there, and the top radiator hose looks like it will fit just fine. I cut a little bit off, but it has that nice turn that we need it to have in order to fit. So yeah, I think that's perfect. That should bolt up. Now we need to go ahead and probably address the bitch of it all and take care of the axle that's locked up into the hub. It's been locked up ever since I removed the D series. So it's time for us to address that. We have to get that thing out of there. I've smacked on it and smacked on it. I've heated it up with blue propane and tried to remove it. It's not budging. So what I did is I just cut it off whenever I was removing the D series. And so now we got to go ahead and try to get it out of there. I'm hoping that I can heat it up with the butane or the yellow canister. I'm pretty sure that's butane. You'll correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure. But we'll try to heat it up with that because I know it gets hotter, and then smack it out again. All right, sweet. So we got it. It came out. It came out of there pretty well after I heated it up with the yellow. Sorry if you guys could hear me breathing heavily. I'm like a little bit out of shape. So winding down here, getting pretty close actually. Radiator hoses hooked up. It's time to put some fluids in it, I believe. I do have the battery charging down here. It was dead because it's been out of the car for quite a few months. So I'm gonna go ahead and put some oil in it. That way it's all ready. The radiator hose that was on the back didn't fit perfectly, so I did have to cut that down a little bit. Honestly, man, this G Plus hose thing is not perfect by any means, but it's cheap. I did watch a Garage Built Honda's video where he was saying that some people have had issues with wiring on the Jack Spania harnesses and all of that, but he didn't have any huge issues. It started right up. So I'm hoping that I kind of have the same luck. It's time to put on some of the underbody stuff, like the shift linkage and the axles, and I have brand new bushings, energy bushings, and linkage. Let's get this stuff opened up and see what it looks like. It's kind of crazy that you can't use any other B series linkage from any other car. It's like not the right size. I guess you have to cut and weld them if you use like the DA Integras and stuff like that. I just didn't want to mess with that. And linkage is way cheaper than it used to be, so went ahead and bought this. These single piece bushings can be kind of a bitch to get in sometimes. Old linkage out, I just wanted to compare. It looks like the reason you can't use it is it's at a slightly different angle, but it's also just a slight bit longer at the end on the bottom piece. So let's look at the top piece. So yeah, looks like the same thing if you match those up down there. It's quite a bit longer on that end of it. Makes sense as to why you couldn't use it. So now we're gonna go ahead and remove all this, get it moved over to the new linkage, and then just get it back up in there. Got the linkage on here, all the way down. Fit just fine. It goes in the gear, so that's a good sign for my transmission. I'm gonna go ahead and put some axles in now. I went ahead and bought DA Integra axles because I have a DA Integra half shaft. Everything I read online said that just use the Integra axles for the half shaft that you're using. This engine came out of a DA Integra, so I used the DA axle. It's kind of interesting that they seem to be very similar to the same size. And there's no male female here, it's just two males. So I'm hoping that's correct. Maybe they changed that later on in the years. Okay, got the axles in. The DA axles did work, but I did have to adjust one. The driver's side, you have to remove the ring that's on the outside of the axle to get it to set flush in here. But other than that, it fit just fine. The other one also is just fine. It is weird that they're both male ends. Sick. So today we got some good news. The package that we've been waiting on came in. Is the actual harness for the EF chassis. This is the DX plug. If you have a DX, you have to have this extra guy, which hooks the computer to your chassis. This one comes with all of them, I believe, but this is the guy we need the most. I also got some spark plugs and a O2 sensor. And on the wiring harness is actually on the back side, like most OBD1 cars are. So I'll probably have to wait until I get a bung and an exhaust to put that in, but the car will start without an O2 sensor for sure. And I'm really excited to get it started and hear it run, just so I don't have to worry about that anymore. And then I'll just worry about the transmission shifting good or it moving under its own power, which is anybody's guess because I don't know anything about this transmission. Spark plug wires are in. I don't have new ones, but I have new spark plugs. I went with those guys right there. You know, nothing fancy, just something. And the adapter harness goes from this guy here inside the car. I do have the distributor unplugged because I want to go ahead and crank it over and get some oil pressure before it starts up. All right, here's what we were missing before. So the computer hooks up into the harness, and then this harness hooks up into the computer plug. But then these were the plugs that we were missing before. This guy here, and actually this guy's still got to be hooked up like that. So now we should be good to go to try to start it. Can't think of anything else. I'm at least gonna crank it over for a minute, make sure we get some oil pressure, and then we'll hook up the distributor and just see what happens, you know? That's all we can really do at this point. This is always the most nerve-wracking part for me. I'm no engine builder, so whenever it comes down to, you know, making sure your stuff's good, it's kind of scary. It's kind of scary. So as you can see, we got the car running. I did have some issues before I was able to start it. The fuel injectors were not working and the fuel pressure regulator needed to be changed out as well. So once I did that, it did fire up. For some reason, the signal wire on the starter isn't working. I don't know why. I'll have to track that down a little bit. But if I jump that wire, it does start right up and run just fine, as you can hear. So now we just got a lot of little odds and ends things to fix up. I'm going to save that for another video though. I'm going to go ahead and end this one right here. If you watch this video, I know it's kind of long and I appreciate you hanging in there with me. If you like what you've seen, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Maybe leave a comment down below. Either way, I'll see you in the next one, guys. Have a good night.